You are listening to the Lucha Central Podcast Network. And now, Lucha Central Weekly.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. This is the podcast that lets you know all of the latest happening in the world of Lucha Libre. Each week we discuss news and events from this past week as well as preview the week ahead, covering Mexico-based promotions and top independents along with luchador-related news from throughout the United States. The Lucha Central Weekly Podcast is part of the Lucha Central Podcast Network on luchacentral.com. This podcast and others from the network are also available on all major podcast streaming platforms, including Spotify, iTunes, Podbay, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Speaker, and more. And don't forget, this show is also distributed through our partners at thechairshot.com. My name is Miranda Morales, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. And let me bring in the rest of the team. Introducing first, he is the dashing one, Mr. Dusty Murphy. Dusty, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Miranda?
I am doing well. We have made it to the month of November. Already, 2021 has flown by. Man, like a madman, and so very eager to see what the rest of the year holds and the rest of this podcast holds. But in order to do that, we got to bring in the third member of that team, of this team, and that's who?
Who?
It's the one and only Brendan Barr.
Hey. Yeah. So I'm just gonna, this is like I'm gonna feed this right back to you. We got to get going. This is like the hot tag right back to you, Miranda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big show tonight.
So just a heads up, we are recording this on a Thursday. And for those of you who are listening this week and know what happened on Thursday, we are going to get into it a little bit later on in the show. We've had Black Mondays, Black Wednesdays, Black Fridays, and now Black Thursdays. So make sure you stay tuned to our thoughts on what's coming ahead. And if you don't know, you will very shortly. But, we start off every episode with the road back to shows with Brendan. So go ahead and take it away.
All right. So, Mexico is still on pace. We're doing great things there. But mostly I've got stuff for the States we've got some big match announcements. Negro Casas is coming to the United States. GCW, thank you so much for making this happen. He's going to be in LA on December 17th. There's a couple more dates that I haven't gotten confirmed yet, so hopefully we will. Oh wait, there we go. I've got 11/7 in Westminster, Colorado. We're going to have the event of Negro Casas versus Rocky Romero at an IWC Legacy show, and that's a Sunday. I'm looking forward to hearing about that one.
Yeah.
GCW also signed Bandito for a few dates. They've got him December 3rd, 4th, and the 17th. So he's going to be on that same show as Negro Casas. I can't promise we'll see them wrestle each other, but man, that'd be great to see live.
Oh my gosh, it'd be incredible. The meshing of their styles would be so good.
Yeah. So those shows for GCW are in Houston, Dallas, and LA. That's, so the 3rd and the 4th, Houston and Dallas. That makes sense to have them that close together. Then we fly out to LA and we have another show with Negro Casas on it. So again, thank you GCW. They seem to be.
Oh yeah. GCW definitely has the respect for Lucha.
Well, I mean, they seem to be really piling it on lately. Like, they're trying to grab as many of these indie luchadors as they can.
It's a smart move.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to throw it to you, Miranda. We've got a couple things here. We hinted at the end of the show last week that we were going to talk about a Masked Republic series of announcements, and then you have another set of shows that's happening in Arizona as well.
Yes. And so let me jump into that. First, I will start off with the series of shows in Arizona. Por Promotions, POR Promotions, is coming back to Arizona in the Phoenix area with their first show in quite some time. This Sunday, November 7th, at Salon 602. That's going to be in Phoenix on Thomas Road. A very stacked card that's being headlined by the Lucha Homies. So that's going to be a great mariachi and Cholo, going to be in tag action there, as well as El Dragon, who's been featured in, Chaos, Lucha Libre, as well as just some Arizona staples, including Aereo, Kona Kota Jr., the Navajo Warrior, and much, much more, at Board Promotions this Sunday, November 7th. The show starts at 5:30. There is going to be a meet and greet, starting at, I believe, 4:00. Which anyone can participate in, but this is a big return for Board Promotions. They also will be having a show in December as well, with more details available online. You can check them out at Board Promotions, POR Promotions, in the Phoenix area. I will be there. So if you are going, please, make sure to stop by and say hello. Very excited, to announce for Board Promotions. This will be my first time, with that. So I am very excited to announce for them. As you mentioned, Brendan, as well, we did have a breaking news towards the end of last week's show that we decided to hold off and wait until sharing until now. But the Masked Republic sponsored Lucha Libre Mexicana is coming back to the Agua Caliente Casino in Cathedral City, California. And for this show will be held on December 11th. And starting at 7 p.m. The show is only $10, and again, they are giving out $5 in casino credit as well. So, this is going to be a great show. It's going to be headlined by Felino and Felino Jr., as well as La Rebellion, Bestia 666, and Mecha Wolf. Psicosis makes his return. Dioso Quetzal also makes an appearance. Super Astro Jr., and much, much more, including El Kukui from Pro Wrestling Revolution, and many more talents are going to be announced and have already been announced for this show. But if you missed out on the previous show, it was fantastic. Lots of lucha libre action. The Agua Caliente Casino in Cathedral City is a amazing venue, and I'm sure it's going to be decorated very well for the holiday season. So watch out for the Masked Republic sponsored Lucha Libre Mexicana on Saturday, December 11th, 7 p.m. Tickets are only $10. $10.
Right. Can't beat, and you get the casino credit, so you could come out with more money than you started with.
And some big names again. The NWA World Tag Team Champions are going to be there. Psicosis, a legend of Lucha Libre, Super Astro Jr., Diosa Quetzal, as well, making her Lucha Libre Mexicana debut. So an amazing show to be had in Cathedral City, California. So stay tuned. Of course, we're going to keep reminding you, letting you know of updates on that show. But make sure you support your local, and independent Lucha Libre promotions.
It's interesting news that, I've got some interesting follow-up news on that. Diosa Quetzal also was on social media this week saying that she's planning on working a few of her last agreed upon dates and retiring. She's not really, of the age that she should be thinking of retirement.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. She's not. I don't think of her in retirement.
It has more to do, speculation over at Lucha Blog seems to be that has more to do with, she's just tired of aspects of the business. But, hopefully one of the shows she's referring to when she says she's working a few of these agreed upon dates is still that Agua Caliente show, cause I've been watching her all throughout 2019 and 2020.
Yeah.
And, I've been really excited to see her live. So,
yeah, me too. She's got such a unique look and style set and everything in the ring. And I mean, her enthusiasm, what she brings to it is contagious. You know, like you feel her emotions because she telegraphs well. So yeah, it's surprising she's considering retiring already.
You know, it's a Lucha Libre retirement, so it may not stick, but, that is where
everybody comes back.
That's true.
But that's my road back to shows for this week. I was trying to stick with some of these positive announcements, looking ahead at the luchadors that are now gonna have more of a chance to work in the United States between, lots of the news that's going on, as well as Mass Republic adding all of these licensed luchadors, all 50-ish of them. So, looks like we're going to have a big 2022. And, we're starting it a little early here at the end of 2021. So I'm looking forward to it.
But up next, Brendan, you had a pretty big weekend, up in your area, your neck of the woods, as they say.
Yeah. So we actually had 3 shows. We had Defy on Friday up in Bellingham. There was a 5cc match. And then, in Everett, Washington, we had the Without a Cause wrestling. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it up to 5cc. I will be reaching out to them to try and get you results, and we may swing, if I get those quickly, we'll swing back around and bring them up. But we did have Defy, who featured prominently a couple of luchadors. They had in the middle of the card, we had Sonico, who's a regular favorite at Defy, against the returning El Fantasmo from New Japan. El Fantasmo, for those of you who don't know, started off in the Pacific Northwest, so he's unofficially kind of a regular around here and has been picking up a few dates here and there. I generally have not talked a lot about El Fantasmo because we talked early on about what is lucha and what isn't. He falls really into the heavy gray area here. He's by his own admission, Fantasmo is a Canadian guy who just took a lucha gimmick, and it's awfully close to El Fantasma, who's kind of a big legend. So it's, a whole thing. But here he is wrestling Sonico, and this week, for whatever reason, he decided to pick me out amongst all of the fans as I was offering him some less than constructive criticism in the form of my middle finger. And he
That's wrestling, man.
That's very constructive of you.
Everybody gives a finger at wrestling shows.
Right. That's what it was. I was like, I'm feeling emotionally invested in this. I want Sonico to win. I don't want you to win. You're talking right now, so I'm going to give you the middle finger. In the middle of that, he saw me, looked right at me, and said, F you, fat boy. So,
Oh.
That's like such a rudo heel. Ric Flair used to say that all the time. That's almost a badge of honor to be told that at a wrestling show.
Almost. But you hit on my point here. We've got Buddy Rosen and Ric Flair used to say it back in the 80s. It's way low hanging fruit. Like, people on this show that listen to this show and have never seen me because we don't do this with video very often probably know I'm fat. Like, come on, ELP. You can do better. I've seen you do better than this.
Try harder.
like it was, where it was a Halloween show. You could have called me like a pumpkin pie. You could have, you just come on. You can do absolutely better. Like, so even Chris Jericho, fellow Canadian and actual luchador, adds dipshit when he calls people fat at this point.
The standards are set high. Just
yeah, just bring the game up. ELP did bring later in the match, in the middle of a rope walk, he did do a callback through a middle finger back my direction while doing the rope walk, which was genuinely cool. But what I've decided I'm going to do is at some point during this show, to return that level of favor, I'm just going to, in the middle of talking, just slip in an FELP and then just keep going. But all of this was just set up. I enjoyed being part of the show for that brief second there. Sonico wound up unfortunately losing. ELP then went on to continue with his dickish behavior, harassing local wrestler and radio personality Steve Miggs, who was working as the ring announcer. So I'm like, even you're not safe, Miranda. He could come after you next.
It's all part of the job.
And it looks like they're kind of setting something up, because he took his boot off and had Miggs kiss his bare feet after knocking him out. So there you go. And then we also had Homicide versus local, I don't know how to do it. Local wrestling personality. He's all over the place. He's lucha trained. He went down and trained with Kali down in India. He helped run the school there. Ethan HD. So we had that. I had the opportunity to speak with Homicide ahead of time. So Homicide is really excited about some things coming up. We'll swing back around, but he's a very nice guy, despite the fact that he literally through the most brutal and violent matches I've ever seen in the post ECW era, and this was no real exception. The two kind of tore the place apart. He threw Ethan HD off the stage at one point. It was, for those of you who are wondering what the result was, Homicide did win. I mean, I don't know if that's surprising to anybody. But so there you go. That was Defy Marauders on Friday, and on Sunday, Without a Cause Wrestling featured once again Sonico, this time against Jordan Oliver. This was the match that this podcast sponsored. So I threw it out on Twitter. I said thank you to Jordan Oliver. Sonico was always happy to represent. It was a banger of a match. You have two young guys that can fly, throw some locks in there, kind of match up. They match up really well in size and height and strength. Nothing wrong with this. So, unfortunately, or I guess, I don't know, Jordan, I don't remember the whole how this all played out, but, we had a bit of a scrum at the end, and I believe it was Jordan Oliver got out on top. I didn't write that down because I was so excited to watch the whole match. And anyway, that was Without a Cause. That was our Without a Cause lucha match. We will be having more. I have received serious hints that Without a Cause is trying to bring in a lot of lucha talent, as we've been talking about. There's more of it becoming available, and knowing there's an audience for it, they want to bring it up, so keep your ears tuned. And then, as I mentioned last week on the road back to shows, IWRG had the Castillo del Terror match, which is the multiple cages that you have to escape from, and you don't so much win this match as opposed to you're not the loser. The last person left in the ring loses their mask or their hair, and generally, has kind of a bit of a setback for, pride, dignity, and fan respect, for a little while. You know how it is. You lose your mask or your hair. It's just hard to recover from that. This featured Pirata Morgan Jr., Dr. Wagner Jr., Diosa Quetzal, Galeno del Mal, Satania, Toxin, Hijo del Pirata Morgan, Hijo del Albrije, Lolita, Pirata Morgan himself, Hijo del Dr. Wagner Jr., Diosa Atena, and Delta. And Pirata Morgan Jr. wound up losing his hair. He cut a couple promos. They very much set up that the Pirata clan does not get along well with the Wagners. There was a lot of talk with that. The Wagners were there kind of enforcing that he got his hair cut at the end of it. So I feel like they're kind of setting up some more stuff. But once again, this was their Halloween themed one. It's up on YouTube. You have lots of the dramatic and effects. I think the ghost came out. There was, CMLL is kind of exclusive to people getting dragged to hell, but they were kind of invoking a lot of that sort of imagery all night long. Ending the night with this match. It's up on YouTube. A lot of the results that have been given are available on my socials and on Lucha Central. And that is my indie roundup for the week.
Thank you, Brendan, for both the Road Back to Shows and the Indie Roundup. Don't forget, if you are an independent wrestling promotion, fan, promoter, wrestler, whatever it may be, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We will give our socials at the end of the show. So that way, if you are interested in promoting a match, a show, an interaction, please let us know. We are big advocates and fans of independent wrestling. And especially if you have any footage, that would be great to share with us, because we are always interested in looking for, things all over, the internet. And speaking of, next week we are going to be having an interview with someone who is pretty well known as far as the clips and videography section of pro wrestling, especially out in the Midwest, independents, and in Lucha Libre. So stay tuned. That's going to be an interesting interview, and some things you definitely will learn more about. But with that, well, you know what time it is. We're going to kick it off to Denise Salcedo, who brings us this week's Lucha Central.
Why should you visit thechairshot.com? Thechairshot.com is your home for hard-hitting reviews, news, opinion, and analysis with attitude. Why? Because you're smarter than the average fan. Thechairshot.com. Always use your head.
Hey everyone, it's Denise Salcedo here in Lucha Central with a reminder of where and when to catch all of the great network content this week. Get the full lineup and listen to all of our shows in the podcast network section of luchacentral.com. On Tuesdays, Mats, and Mayhem takes you inside the world of Lucha Underground as they take you weekly through the series with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of special guests from the groundbreaking series. Check out the premiere video stream every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on the Lucha Central YouTube channel and at luchacentral.com. Then listen to it on your favorite podcast platform every Wednesday. Tuesday nights live, it's Wrestle Boss, where Fabi Chulo talks MMA and pro wrestling with special guests and listener call-ins. Visit WrestleBossLive.com Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific to listen live or call in with questions, or download the show on podcast platforms on Wednesdays. Wednesday nights live on Facebook, it's Spanish show La Mesa de los Márgaros, giving you both the news and the chisme from around the lucha world. Special guests and a whole lot of fun make it one of the most talked about shows in Mexico. Thursdays, it's Straight Out of the Bodega with Papo Esco and PWR promoter Gabriel Ramirez, as they have guests from throughout the wrestling world pull up to give an inside look into their careers. From indie standouts to television superstars, each week brings a new name and perspective. On Friday, it's your double dose of Lucha Central Weekly podcast. One in English y el otro en español. Lucha Central Weekly is where you'll find all the top stories of the week, both inside and out of the ring from Mexico and anywhere luchadores are in action across the globe. Be sure to subscribe and follow all your favorite Lucha Central Network series on your favorite podcast platforms, either by their own series name or subscribe to the Lucha Central Podcast Network show pages to get all of the shows in one easy feed. And please consider giving a rating to help more fans find the shows that you love. For now, this is Denise Salcedo signing off from Lucha Central Central. Have a great week.
Lucha-Masks.com by Pro Wrestling Revolution, bringing you, in partnership with Mask Republic, the Lucha Brothers, as well as Japanese legend Ultimo Dragon. Go to lucha-masks.com and fight Lucha Strong with masks from your favorite Lucha legends and Pro Wrestling Revolution luchadores. Stay safe in style and represent your favorite luchador. Get yours now at lucha-masks.com, powered by Pro Wrestling Revolution.
And that was Denise Salcedo with this week's Lucha Central Central, letting you know what's happening throughout the Lucha Central Podcast Network. All right, so we're just going to get straight to it. As we alluded to a little bit earlier, we are recording this on a Thursday. It has just been really a few brief hours in which news was announced regarding a series of releases from WWE. And this has happened periodically throughout the past year, and we've covered them on the show. However, there are some very specific names with this group that hit very close to home to not only the world of Lucha Libre, but also this podcast. So you know we're going to be talking about it. Before we get to our gut reactions, I'm just going to be reading off really the names of all of the released wrestlers in there. And from there, we'll kind of discuss what we feel about it. First off, we have Frankie Monet from NXT, Ember Moon, Jessica Maya, Zeta Ramir, Oni Lorcan, B-Fab, Nia Jax, Eva Marie, Jeet Rama, Trey Baxter, and some of the more notable names on here, Gran Metalik, Lindsay Dorado, Scarlett, Karrion Kross, Mia Yim, and Keith Lee. So, the names that definitely stand out on this podcast and in the world of Lucha Libre, of course, Frankie Monet, as we know as Taya Valkyrie, Katrina Cortez, who we've talked about over the past few weeks, who has been on both NXT and 205 Live. Of course, the team of Scarlett and Karrion Kross, with Karrion only been signed since early last year, and Scarlett not too long after that. Lucha House Party, Gran Metalik and Lindsay Dorado both released with, we've already seen reports previously that Gran Metalik had requested his release, prior to that, as well too. But even, the big names like Keith Lee who have been on the active roster as well. So now that we've discussed some of these names, I want to get what your gut reaction is with this. So Dusty, I'm going to start with you.
Oh my gosh, I was shocked. Honestly, I was kind of holding my breath, and I hate to say this, but I was holding my breath because I was afraid we were going to see Legado del Fantasma at some point with some of the names released. And then the more luchadors released, I started to worry for Ray and Dominic as well. Yeah. There hasn't been a strong direction for them right now. It seems like on the main roster, for whatever reason, they couldn't figure out Karrion Kross.
Yeah.
Scarlett was a huge part of what made him special. They never used her on the main roster. They never leaned to the supernatural thing. And I know that they had, before we've had The Undertaker, Bray Wyatt. I think if they had done it right, Karrion could have easily fit in that spot, that supernatural spot. They just didn't do it for whatever reason, and I'm baffled on that. But, I mean, it's not just the main roster. We also saw with Frankie Monet. She signed just this year on Valentine's Day. She didn't even make it 7 months. She had 6 matches?
Yeah.
And the entire time she was there. I don't know if WWE has ever so thoroughly and consistently dropped the ball on a ready-made star, like the star of any division, like they did with Taya, Frankie Monet. EC3 is a close second, but I'm not as certain he was ready to be the guy, the focus of a division, the way that Taya was. Like, she could have been the focus of any women's division in the world and been a star. And she goes to NXT and they have nothing for her. They didn't do anything with her. And I'm just baffled. I know that they're rebranding NXT. She's, I think a couple years younger than me, but over 30. And, they allegedly had needed to go around under 30 only. We're kind of seeing the results of that. But can you imagine having somebody that looks like Taya on your roster and going, no, I'm only looking for under 30s. Like, she is the total package. And
I want people with less experience, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's surprising.
Like worldwide experience.
Yeah.
She has the look. She has the talent. She has the ability. She has the connection. She's married to John Morrison. I mean, she's friends with everybody. She knows everybody. Everybody loves Taya. And they couldn't come up with anything for her. And that blows my mind. WWE, at this point, I'm convinced they only get lucky when something catches on. I don't know what the writers are doing, because when you have somebody that's literally the total package that could be the star of any show, any division, ready-made, main event talent, like Taya, and you can't do anything, like, your smallest local indie could have done something with Taya.
Mm-hmm.
How could WWE not? Like, it baffles me, and they have lost whatever magic or whatever touch they used to have. And it's just more and more apparent every week. The people that are getting reactions and the people we want to see aren't the people we're getting to see. They've become accustomed during the Thunderdome era. They could pipe in the boos and the cheers. Yeah. The crowds did exactly what they wanted them to, and so they don't even have to organically get somebody over the same way they used to anymore. It's very strange. I feel like the cuts in total show that the company is perhaps up for sale. Record profits during the pandemic, all that Saudi blood money coming in, $50 million a year, and I don't know. The whole thing just, literally every name on there baffles and kind of disgusts me. Keith Lee had some incredible matches. I mean, it was about 2 years ago, right, that he was super over. He did Roman at Survivor Series, Brock at the Royal Rumble. Everything he did, he looked like a damn star.
Well, and he's a WWE guy. Like, if you were to describe a WWE guy, you might picture Keith Lee. Like, yeah.
And then Katrina Cortez, like, she was on 205 Live a lot lately. I had mentioned that. We'd covered on the show. I'm actually going to cover last week's match later in the show. But the crowds loved her. Like, when you watched 205 Live last week, the crowds were super into her. She was easily the most popular person that wrestled on 205 Live last week by crowd reaction. And so, how does that not figure into some of your decision making? Grand Metalik, Grand Metalik, one of the best wrestlers in the world. Apparently, he's tweeted that he's already going back to the name Mascara Dorada. I think he should. That name doesn't have the stink of WWE on it the way Grand Metalik does.
And it has a built-in fan base that probably hasn't been watching.
Absolutely. And Grand Metalik was a main event star. I mean, he was the guy in CMLL. And deservedly so. So often it's a politic to get to the top. But his was sheer in-ring ability. Like, the things he could do in the ring pushed him all the way to the top. And he was amazing in the Cruiserweight Classic. All my favorite matches in the Cruiserweight Classic were Grand Metalik matches. Yeah. And then they don't let him do any of that once he's signed. And then instead of letting him be a single star, they put him in a tag team. he got really lucky with Lindsay. Like, these guys worked great together. I mean, so many tag teams are just thrown together. I mean, like, RK Bro is funny, but it's just random.
Yeah.
And I know why they put the two luchadors together, but they worked so well together that it was just magic, and they captured lightning in a bottle there. And I think they were even better without Kalisto once it was just the two of them. Like, these guys were so fluid. Some of the flips, the shooting star presses that Lindsay did, the rope walks and stuff that Grand Metalik did were still miles ahead of anything lucha that we see in WWE. I'm honestly a little impressed they held on this long. When we heard about 3 weeks ago, Metalik asked for his release. Every release, they were kind of the people we thought might be released, and they weren't. But they never did anything with them in the interim either. So it's really just a testament to how much talent WWE had and could not cash in on. They couldn't come up with anything for. They couldn't use what they already had and keep it at a consistent level even.
Well, that's, I mean, you mentioned it, but I always go back to this, like this, when I became aware of it, like in the 2000s, they fired the Dudley Boys, and famously Bubba Ray said, at the time even, the reason they were let go is because WWE Creative couldn't find anything for them to do. So you're talking about the hottest, most over tag team in the entire world at the time that happened. And they're like,
and maybe in history. Like, if you don't remember how hot the Dudleys were, you weren't there, because they
you look
were
at the passing
so
on
hot.
of tag teams, and they're absolutely up there in their entire WWE run.
And we can't find anything for you to do, so we're gonna just let you go. Like, come on. That just reeks of, that was where, like I said, where I started to smell the problems here that the WWE had, the disconnect you have between the front office and the talent that has to work in front of the crowd, because the talent are busting their asses, doing their very best with the kind of handcuffs they're getting in this WWE style, and the people at the top just are like, no, we don't have anything for tag teams right now. Tag teams are weird. We're just not gonna, and again, to your point about luck, like, they threw the two guys in mass into a team together because that's what they do. I'm looking. Kalisto was also in the Lucha Dragons, so come on.
Yeah.
Like, that's two guys in mass. You're a tag team. But they hit on it again. They got lucky, and then because
they had one of the best tag teams. Like, Lindsay and Metalik were both, or, Mascara Dorada, I need to get used to saying that again. But they were both really impressive singles guys. I mean, Lindsay was so good in Chikara. He was tearing it up on the indies. When the Cruiserweight Classic came in, he was the guy I thought might win. Like, he was my dark horse candidate, was Lindsay Dorado. He works with Urban Aztec. If you remember the mask that he had when he started in WWE, it's my favorite mask of all time. Like, that is the coolest mask. And so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just
fun fact for you, Dusty. Lindsay was hanging out at the first Expo Lucha at Urban Aztec's booth most of the weekend, and nobody knew who he was.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's crazy to me.
And he couldn't officially be there because he was WWE contracted, but, people who knew, knew. I mentioned this off air, so I'm going to bring it to this now. My biggest concern, like, I always have this reaction of, yay, they're released from the WWE, now we can see something. But then I realized that I had a lot of that reaction last week with ROH wrestlers being freed up, and there's a lot of WWE Lucha talent that's been released. There's a lot of general talent that's been released. And there's only so many indie shows running, and there's only so many spots on it. Like 5 to 7 matches is not a lot of matches. And unless you're running a Lucha show, they can't all be 6-man tags. But
well, and that's just it. Like, I don't necessarily, I mean, I was honestly kind of shocked. We'll get to this later, but Samuray Del Sol debuted in AEW this week. I don't know that he was signed. I think it was a per appearance from what I understand. But I was shocked that he made it to AEW because there is so much talent out there right now. What have you heard from Samuray Del Sol lately? He was somebody that if at this point, could have gone to the Indies, torn it up for a while and come back and it would have made sense. And I don't know that somebody in his position necessarily gets that spot next time because you have higher on the ladder names now. Look at all the names of free agents coming.
This brings up the point. So we will talk about that angle, but largely that angle happened because FTR are challenging luchadors. So they needed high profile luchadors to come in and do that match. Had they waited a week to do that match, they would have had an entirely different field of people. And you're absolutely right. Samuray Del Sol probably wouldn't have made the list because there would have been a lot more people that are more individually known in the States as luchadors to do that.
Even Mascara Dorada, he may not be as well known, but the visual appeal and the flash that he brings in ring, that would get over with an AEW crowd with no backstory. They would go nuts for that. They're the exact right audience for somebody like, Mascara Dorada, Grand Metalik. And
make a note of that because I will come back to that when we talk about AEW because you're right. And I have very specific, but that's all going to be part of the AEW stuff. Miranda, did you have any thoughts? You got us both to open our mouths and spout our feelings. What were your feelings when you saw these releases?
Well, I have to say I was very surprised by a lot of them, especially some of the newer talents or the talents that we've seen on the main roster. As far as the ones that we've been discussing, Frankie Monet, Dusty said, had just been signed earlier this year. It's something that I really was surprised to see, especially because not only does she have the talent in ring, but she has the television experience. She is someone that we have talked multiple times who gets the sports entertainment aspect of wrestling and could have easily been folded into a sports entertainment like environment because she is an athlete but also has the personality. And so someone who was very custom made for WWE with, just the comedy side, the acting, the in-ring ability, she could do it all. That really surprised me. Karrion Kross and Scarlett. As much as it was still very unknown what was happening with Karrion Kross, it also looked like Scarlett was tailor-made for this company. Her look, her attitude.
Yeah. As much as Keith Lee is a WWE guy, Scarlett is a WWE girl. Lady, woman. I'm sorry. I apologize for my language.
Yes.
It's hard for me too.
Yes. So, that's really surprised me. As far as Grand Metalik, that didn't necessarily surprise me as much, but I would say what we did, consider and talk about previously is where that left Lindsay. And that too, in some way was a surprise, but some way I think could be a blessing in disguise for him where he can now really relaunch his career as a new Lindsay. I think, diving a little bit into where some people are going to land, I think him coming into another company or a series of independents with a little bit of an edge, really taking off, cause Lucha House Party was very much fun and entertaining and, para los niños, if you want to, phrase it in a certain way.
Thank you, the Park family.
Yes, but, I think too, he's an incredible athlete. He is also someone who has a great look and someone who's incredibly talented. And I think being able to go in with a little bit more of an edge or a different look, it can do wonders for him because he's been associated with WWE for such a long time.
Yep.
I do think one of the blessings in disguises as well is that Karrion hasn't been off the independents for that long. So he still, I'm sure, has homes in lots of places. I already know, Future Stars of Wrestling is going to be counting down the days to when he can come back. But even a place like MLW, which was one of those promotions he was with not too long before he signed with WWE. So I think because of the fact that he hasn't been off the independent scene for that long, that transition back into that scene could be something that's a lot easier for him. And Scarlett has already posted on her social medias, the openings that she's willing to take bookings again. So I mean, I think too, the landscape for her is, endless, for her as well, but also both of them as a team. Who knows if we will see them back in Mexico at any point with AAA. And going back to Frankie, we talked about it even last week when we discussed the PWI Women's 150, is that, she had a really good place in Impact, and I think she has a lot of business left in Impact, especially now that the Knockouts division has changed. You have a new champion. Yeah. You've had, new talent there. I think that she,
and they've got that AAA connection.
She has the AAA connection, and even some interesting twists like the new digital media championship that they put out. Yeah. Is that going to be necessarily super high profile? No, but it is an intergender belt, and that's something that Taya is incredibly gifted at. And, that could be kind of a new area, a new pathway for her if she does go back to Impact. So, I mean, there's a lot to be told with it, but those are kind of just my initial reactions and then where I think people will land. Kind of a quick final note too on what you guys think. With the landscape of wrestling changing so much, we just talked about it last week with Ring of Honor. And they are, modifying their business model / may completely not come back after December. You have now AEW in the mix of, even if it's on a per, appearance basis, having a lot of content that they need to fill out on a weekly basis. And even other things like MLW with, their updates to their rosters. NWA, who's still very sporadic with their tapings, but still fairly active. And then even bigger independents like a GCW. What are kind of your thoughts on where people may land and what's going to happen with them?
So we were already sort of getting around there. That's where it gets really weird. I think you have a strong point that Karrion Kross, because it was basically a hiccup that was no longer than an injury timeout, has a home anywhere he goes. I think AAA is going to win big on a lot of this. They may not sign everybody to strong contracts for this, but they're going to grab a lot of this talent, put them in one-off events or 2 or 3 appearances, that sort of thing. And, they're going to, cause that can really up their visibility by grabbing these guys, and they absolutely will. But here in the States, as we were kind of getting to, luchadors have a spot being luchadors, but you don't, Cubs fan expanded on this on his blog recently. But the facts speak for themselves on it too. You just don't have a lot of space on your average card for luchadors to just exist. They're usually in matches because they're luchadors. And then the really transcendent ones like your Karrion Krosses, your Rey Mysterios, even though that he's never going to be in the indies ever again. They're able to work their way to the top of the card and be part of that, and then leave that lucha spot for other people. But right now, that's with these mass releases, that's all that they're, you're looking at. Like, we need an ex-WWE guy. We need an ex-lucha. We need a luchador. You're never an ex-luchador. So it's going to be weird to see that. GCW has, as you mentioned, is going to be, is very good about featuring luchadors, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, we talk about it in the indie roundup as we can. Super indies like Defy, and then Galley in Chicago when they're able to run shows, and a couple of other Chicago promotions and Texas promotions feature luchadors. But those, they're really low budget, like 4 times a year kind of shows in a lot of these cases. So what are they going to do the rest of the year? Especially since, Impact can't just open up their checkbooks. AEW has to at some point stop the bleeding and stop taking every wrestler. And, I mean, I don't even know, again, ROH can't pick anybody up. Lindsay with a dark edge showing up in ROH as it was running 2 weeks ago would have been fantastic. He could have partnered with Dark Flamita or Demonic Flamita. You could have had an Evil Luchadors tag team. That would have been fantastic. I don't know where, I mean, like, he's the one I really don't know because he could do anything.
Yeah.
It would be a great win for anybody, but, he's probably just going to take some one-off indie dates. Dusty, did you have any thoughts on where people are going to wind up? Or what
The big winner, I think, in all of this, truly, if they're going to make a strong play, could be MLW for Azteca Underground.
Mm-hmm.
This has been the most luchadors and lucha-adjacent talent on the market on a long time. There's a lot of people now that have been on Lucha Underground that are currently released. I mean, I don't want to wish evil on anybody, but if I was Ricochet, I'd be sweating it right now.
Well,
I mean, just being honest, like, look at all the guys that we covered on Main Event that have been released lately.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Jackson Riker's still there.
I was gonna joke about that too, that Main Event seems to be the kiss of death, but,
yeah.
I should stress at this point while we're talking about this, frequently these waves last over days. So this story may not be done yet,
Right.
I'm still holding my breath.
It may have evolved.
Yeah. And that's very, very true. And there's more to come because as we will hear over the next few weeks as well, as, we hear more news about, what these releases mean. Maybe we will find out right away, who's going to be picked up or who's going to be featured on things. I know those in the NXT realm have a shorter non-compete clause than those on the main roster.
Yes, we found out through all kinds of WWE mismanagement.
So, that's, Aleister Black just got away because his contract was not updated. But, say like I believe a Trey Baxter already, GCW is announcing him for dates in December.
Mm-hmm.
Because, NXT dates or NXT non-competes are different.
Yeah.
30 days.
Charlotte tweeted, I'll be ready to work anywhere in 30 days or something.
Yeah. So that too will be kind of a first wave of people that we see out. And then, kind of a next wave as well. So we'll see, say a Taya Valkyrie, and we're gonna call her back Taya. She already put it on her socials. Yeah. She is Taya motherfucking Valerie. Going back to her.
And she's got so many interests too. She had the clothing line. She likes to act in horror movies and stuff. She was too far spread. Her reach was too wide for a WWE contract to hold her down. So she wasn't going to be long for them anyway.
Yeah.
And
but yeah, I mean, I think
going back so good to have her back though.
Yes. Oh gosh. I mean, again, I think as we all agree, it's just kind of a wasted opportunity. The potential was there. All of the factors were there. What they decide to do with people and not is the business of the WWE. But I know that a lot of them still have, again, it's a different landscape in pro wrestling, even just in this past week. And it's going to continue to evolve over the next few months and even over the next year. And which we will see at, other promotions throughout the independent scene. Maybe who lands at AEW, who knows? But we got you covered here on the Lucha Central Weekly podcast. So make sure you stay tuned each and every week because we will have updates. As soon as we have them, we will share those with you. And of course, our thoughts on what is happening in the world of Lucha Libre. But we're going to move on because we still have a whole week's worth of content to cover, including this week in AEW. We had a special appearance of someone who we've interviewed on the show on Dark Elevation, and of course that big AAA tag team match on Dynamite and more. So Dusty, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, first up we had Tuesday Dark, and we had Viva Van versus the native beast Nyla Rose. It was awesome. This was largely a squash match, though, but it was awesome to see Viva Van in AEW again. She's getting that national exposure. I mean, she has done so much for her brand and her reach and just name recognition this year. I mean, watch out in 2022. Viva Van, she's going to be a big deal. The match started with Vicky Guerrero yelling at Justin Roberts to get out of the ring because he sucks. Then she told the crowd that they should be honored that she was willing to show up. Just fabulous Rudo shit in the ring. It was amazing. Vicky is a master. Viva was able to get a little bit of offense in, but Nyla was dominant, and she just didn't relent. She finally hit the Beast Bomb, got the victory in 1 minute and 32 seconds. And then we had Wednesday Night Dynamite. If you follow me on social media, you know your boy Dusty was at this episode of Dynamite.
Heck yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. It was really the episode that was there to build up Full Gear and round out the official lineup for the show. But there were some nice lucha highlights during the show. Just felt lucky to be there for this one. First up, we had Aerostar and Samuray Del Sol, formerly known as Kalisto, making their AEW debut. It was a loss against FTR, but great match. FTR announced that they had an open challenge on the AAA titles for any luchador who was not the Lucha Bros. And honestly, I thought this was building to a swerve where it was going to be the Lucha Bros under some generic masks, kind of like FTR had done.
Yeah.
But we got lucky. We got Aerostar, Samuray Del Sol. Aerostar seemed nervous, a little hesitant during the match. He wasn't quite the Aerostar we remember from those, was it the best of 5, best of 7, something like that, with Drago on Lucha Underground. That wasn't the Aerostar we got. He never seemed to catch his rhythm, but then there was a dive and he seemed to injure his leg, at least from within the arena. That's how it looked. And he, just kind of slowed up a bit then. It wasn't the same. But the chemistry between FTR and Samuray Del Sol, and this is why I think he was chosen for this spot, the chemistry was fantastic. And you could tell they'd worked against each other before. They had had around a dozen matches in WWE against each other in late 2018 and early 2019. Handful of house show matches in there as well. And so I would imagine when it came time for a luchador that needed to come in, they may have recommended Samuray Del Sol. They worked with him before. They knew they worked well with him. But like we mentioned, with all these spots coming up and people coming up, it was very lucky for Samuray Del Sol when he got the call. Yeah. He had an amazing spot in the match that I don't know if it necessarily went viral, but it was popular on social media, where he walked on his hands to the ring rope and then he did like these backflips into a head scissors. It was amazing. The finish was Aerostar grabbing Wheeler, putting him into a victory roll, but then Wheeler reversed it while using the rope and having a handful of Aerostar's tights to get the pin and retain the AAA Tag Team Championships in 8 minutes and 44 seconds. What a big spot for Aerostar, too. Like, that was the real surprise. Samuray Del Sol was a surprise, but Aerostar was like a shock. And I was, just so happy to be there. Go ahead, Brenda.
When I thought it through, though, it was less of a shock to me because Aerostar was part of the last big luchadors in the United States kind of push. He was on Lucha Underground, and he's not currently signed to MLW. So I was like, this makes sense. And he was really popular on that show.
Yeah, he was. He was beloved. Him and Drago were, together, especially on Lucha Underground. And I was talking to some people seated right beside us at the show, and they kind of knew Lucha, and they were like, oh yeah, he lives in Chicago. Talking about Aerostar, and I was like, he lives in Chicago? And I was like, he's a Mexican luchador. And they're like, oh yeah, he lives in Chicago. So maybe they knew something I didn't know, but it was interesting. And yeah, I don't know, very exciting. Also, what we had super exciting, we had Andrade defeating Cody in a huge win for Andrade. The match was very evenly paced throughout, but the partnership between Andrade and FTR continues. FTR popped up from under the ring, causing Cody's suicide dive to throw him straight into the AAA Tag Team titles, gave Andrade some easy work to get the pin in 10 minutes and 35 seconds. Afterwards, Tully and Arn began to square off, and the Lucha Bros ran in, and they were wearing some very hype streetwear fashion. They looked fantastic, great shoes. I mean, I love seeing luchadors in street clothes with the masks on. Such a cool look.
So that sweater that Penta was wearing, when he first came running out, I was like, is that Conan in a Pentagon mask? He looked like he was, having some trouble and he looked a little, got a better look at it. You're right. It was a much better looking, but for a second, he looked like he was an angry old man trying to chase kids off the lawn.
Yeah, in person it really looked good, but on video, you're right. Like with the lighting and all, it wasn't quite the choice that it was well lit. And after the match, the Lucha Bros ran in. They helped kind of even up the numbers, ran off FTR and Andrade. Then Penta even helped Cody to the back. But if you remember, not that long ago, just before the baby was born, Penta had some very nasty things to say to Cody. Never resolved. Now they're bros. Yeah. Somebody told me that they hope my pregnant wife and baby died. I probably wouldn't be too nice to them or even accept their help to the back of the arena. But Cody, he's a more amenable fella than me. He lets bygones be bygones, I guess. But that kind of ties into what I wanted to mention next. All of this makes me wonder what's going on with FTR. They're ostensibly part of the Pinnacle, but when MJF had his segment, we saw Wardlow and Shawn Spears come out to fight the Darby Army and the Darby MJF face-off. But FTR right now seem to be doing their own thing with Andrade connection. And as we've seen, and I mentioned with the Cody and Penta feud, sometimes AAA just drops the ball storyline-wise. And I have a feeling this is one of those moments, that this is just never going to be explained in terms of the Pinnacle. Like, they just don't need them right now, Pinnacle, and this is something we can do with them. And
so
honestly,
why then go out of their way to distance them from that? And the first time we got this, with that stairway scene, which the commentary referenced multiple times during the match, both of these matches. So I'm very confused. So they, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Wrestling.
Wrestling.
Well, and I am very excited to see FTR in AAA. I think that could bring some fresh and interesting matchups. And honestly, their grounded, kind of more brawling style would be a great base for a lot of the higher flying luchadors. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So that was what I wanted to swing back around to is, if we had an evil manager type, this would, at AEW, this would feel like they were booking FTR in their personal hell. Because by being Lucha Tag Team Champions, they now have to fight all guys that are flippy stuff. Cause that's what American Luchadors pretty much are branded as.
Exactly.
So that's why when you were talking about bringing, Metalik in and matching up that way, I'm like, those two Metalik and FTR would match up great because FTR is actually really good at basing flyers. We've seen it over their career over and over again.
Yeah, and when I saw Samuray Del Sol do that hand walk into the double backflip into a head scissors, I was like, oh yeah, those guys can take anything. Like any move they can take.
Yeah.
And so I think even though it's convoluted storyline wise and it doesn't really make any sense to me in terms of the story, I think it's terribly exciting to see them against luchadors. Like that's kind of my thing. And people forget that a lot of luchador, I think that's the other thing. They'll finally get kind of a rhythm together against the high flying team. Then you bring in somebody that can brawl. I'm not saying the Parks necessarily, but look at them in terms of like the difference between flippy lucha libre and like hard hitting bloody lucha libre.
Yes.
And
the
then,
Texas versus California.
yes.
Thank you, Miranda.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, we hit them with a bunch of California and maybe some Tijuana style. Then we bring them that Texas style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, Texas Lucha Deathmatch or something. I don't know.
Ooh.
I would be all in on that.
Yeah.
So,
more variety. I think that's what it is too. I
Yeah.
think because AEW is built for smarter fans, it's that I think the expectation is also set a little bit higher, that because they are more of a wrestling-based company, that they really start to now dive deeper than more just surface level lucha libre, because they have the education. When we do that comparison between WWE, that is much more sports entertainment, and AEW, which is a pro wrestling company, I think the expectation is set for a preference to do more, especially when you have, like, you know, a lot of your tag teams have Lucha Libre experience between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, and you're starting to get a wider range of either Lucha trained or Lucha adjacent talent, that you just don't want to keep producing the same type of surface level matches. You know, you want to be able to go deeper, because they already do with other styles of wrestling, that you kind of wonder, you know, why not Lucha Libre?
So, I mean, as much as I don't really want to root for Psycho Clown, the payoff might in fact be the Psycho Circus for bringing in that Texas style. I was just thinking of who AAA could send up, and that's the matchup that I like for that sort of swerve. Sorry, I just, my mind got excited once Dusty started bringing that idea up. So I'm just fantasy booking now. That's what I do.
check in at luchacentral.com for all the news and everything else regarding AEW. We'll be here next week. We'll find out who FTR wrestles next time. More about Andrade and everything else. Same Lucha time, same Lucha channel.
Thank you, Dusty. Up next, we got This Week in MLW and some interesting tidbits. If you haven't watched MLW this week, you definitely need to. We started off the show with Cesar Duran coming out to the ring, saying that the show was missing something and that he needed a sacrifice, possibly alluding to the opening segment from last week's show with him and Mil Muertes. And then 5150 interrupts him. Conan especially coming face to face with Senor Duran, is pretty much saying they've been looking for him and calling, Cesar Duran out, saying that they want Los Parks. Between Conan and Cesar Duran, a little bit of back and forth between them. Good stuff. If you like some good shit talking, that's what's up. They got that. Yeah. But then, Los Parks come out. We have a brawl between 5150 and Los Parks, which we will get into a second, but leads to an announcement that has come out regarding War Chamber this weekend. But, 5150 is out for those tag titles. A little bit after that, we did have Tom Lawler come out, who also confronted Cesar Duran, saying that he felt like he's been treated like trash and he's been screwed, and that he wants a title match. And Cesar Duran said, of course, I can give you a title match. You are going to get a title match between Mil Muertes for the IWA Caribbean Championship, and it will be a casket match. That leads us to the main event of this week's show, the casket match between King Muertes and Tom Lawler. And we had a return of sorts. The entrances for this match started with King Muertes having a hooded woman come to the ring, and she revealed herself to be Carly Perez.
Yeah.
So now
so
that
hype.
Is alluding to the ceremony that happened last week and bringing someone back from the dead. So now we do now have kind of the manager, if you want to call it in the business sense, but more of the wrangler / guide for King Muertes. So very much singing back to the tones of Lucha Underground. But this match itself was really straightforward with the power of King Muertes all throughout the match. Tom Lawlor was able to really get in some innovative moves, really trying to utilize the transition between moves to kind of try to lock in some arm bars and some submission moves, but he couldn't, it was incredibly difficult for him to overpower King Muertes. He was power bombed through or onto the casket, which left a pretty big dent in there. And several times Tom Lawlor could not get that lid closed just because of the strength that King Muertes had. Eventually King Muertes won the match, with his finishing maneuver, the straight to hell, and ended up rolling Tom Lawlor into the casket, shutting it to win and retain the IWA Caribbean Championship. A very interesting note about this, I believe just yesterday, the day before, Tom Lawlor also announced on social media that he is now a free agent. So that too is kind of an interesting storyline aspect to this match as a way to write off Tom Lawlor.
He did.
Yes.
He did.
Yes, he did. He did.
Dead.
But as we know, anyone can come back from the dead. So aspects of Lucha Underground are still coming up with Azteca Underground. And we are also seeing kind of a rotation of talent within MLW. So, a great episode of Fusion. We also had, some additional matches along there, but that was just the main Lucha Central or Lucha Centric one, that happened this week. We do have War Chamber coming up this Saturday, November 6th in Philadelphia. We talked previously last week about some of the matches announced for that show, including Homicide versus LA Park. And Brendan, you mentioned earlier that you spoke with Homicide this past weekend, and he actually had some specific thoughts regarding this match with LA Park that he shared with you.
Yeah, so as soon as he found out that I was working with Lucha Central, he was on fire to tell me that he is fired up for this match. This is one of his checklist matches, and he is super excited to do this. And he said, we're probably going to see some stuff we haven't seen him do in a long time. So, that just in general, I'm excited that he's excited. I'm excited he is a fan of the Lucha product in such a way that he's looking at things he wants to do before he finishes his career. LA Park is on that list. I mean, super exciting stuff. I'm just going to casually mention this. He did mention that he likes the show as well. So there we go.
Well, yeah, 'cause he's a good ass man, cause he's the shit. That's why, are we just going to get into it? We're going to get into it, Homicide's a beast. So, very exciting news as far as just those thoughts, on really, it sounds like a dream match for him against LA Park. Again, this is the first time, I believe, in 3 years that Homicide is, going to be at MLW. And so, I mean, man, we talk about brawler style or lucha libre. This is absolutely what we expect from Homicide versus LA Park. Also, a announcement that was just made earlier this week, as we heard 5150 called out Los Parks, and they are getting them. They are getting them in a Philly street fight for the World Tag Team Championship. So, as Papa Park, LA Park is going to be fighting Homicide, Los Hijos are going to be facing 5150 in a Philly street fight for the World Tag Team Championships. And as Danny Limelight was on here not too long ago saying he's going for tag team gold wherever he goes. So this is just another nail in the proverbial coffin for him, between him, Slice, with Dr. Julius. They're all coming for that tag team gold. And with LA Park being, in his own match, that does leave the numbers game for really the first time in a while not in the odds of Los Parks.
And more than that, the mentor and kind of guiding figure, because the Park style is all about chaos, but usually they're the ones that are creating the chaos. Mm-hmm. you're losing all of that experience if you don't have LA Park at least at ringside. Who knows if he's going to make it there or not, because he may be having to worry about Homicide, or, I don't know what the order is going to look like, but I can't imagine this tag team match happening after the Homicide match. So, so it's an interesting story. They're definitely making the Parks look more vulnerable. There's lots of ways that 5150 can come out on top on this, and I feel like they kind of should. Yeah. I'm excited to see this one. I'm excited. This whole card is going to be great, you guys. It's going to be fantastic.
It's really a super, super stacked card. Speaking of new championships, we have a ladder match for the vacant National Open Weight Championship. Alex Shelley versus Myron Reed versus Alex Kane versus Zenshi versus the wild card. So we also have a mystery competitor in this match that we will not know who it is until they walk out. But again, as we talked about, this match could be really made for Zenshi, who is one of those high-flying luchadors who we've seen jump off of anything. So he can have a competitive edge in this match over, say, the experience of an Alex Shelley or the size of an Alex Kane. Zenshi is absolutely, the literal, somewhat of the proverbial wild card, but then also, again, the actual wild card in there, that can really throw this match for a loop. We also have TJP versus Calvin Tankman in the Opera Cup semifinals. Enzo making his debut with MLW against Matt Cross. The winner gets a briefcase full of cash. Enemies and Adis that, again, we've seen them go back and forth for quite some time on the independents. They are, the Galley Lucha Libre Tag Team Champions, but at MLW War Chamber, they are enemies because the winner gets a bunch of cash.
A bag of cash.
Lots of money. So, man, money will make you do strange things. And then also, the actual War Chamber match was also announced this week that there will be 2 mystery teammates for Alex Hammerstone. He already has enlisted the help of Richard Holiday and EJ Nanduka against Contra, with Jacob Fatu, Mads Kruger, Joseph Samael, Ikura Kawan, and one of their forget the proper terminology, but it is kind of death associates.
One of their soldiers.
Yes, one of their soldiers will be part of that 5. So there are 2 spots open in the War Chamber match for Alex Hammerstone. And again, we don't know who those people are, but we will see at War Chamber this Saturday, November 6th. In Philadelphia. We will see these matches, I'm sure, throughout the next few weeks on Alpha Fusion, which again you can find on YouTube each and every week. It's an hour long, lots of great content in a short amount of time, and especially this card. You want to make sure you watch Fusion each and every week because almost every card on this entire show is lucha related, lucha adjacent. So,
I do have a quick point on this card because they're filming live with all of the ROH releases. Now we won't get most of the WWE people unless they really screwed up with their contracts. We could get people, from those ROH releases that weren't originally planned to be on this card, but if you can get a Bandito last minute, I'm just throwing that one out there because he's the high end of what's available right now, but you will. And then, in storyline, they've been teasing that those 2 spots on the War Chamber might be filled by Cesar Durant's contacts, from his lucha underground fighting background, so that they're hinting it might be Lucha Underground stars. So we can't overstate enough that how this could turn into a really big deal for lucha fans. But with the ROH releases in particular, plans they might have had 2 weeks ago may very well have drastically changed. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Such a good point, because again, that's also, as we talk about the wrestling landscape has changed so much. As we refer back to Ring of Honor talent, they have been given permission to be free agents immediately. Yeah. So they now could show up anywhere at any time.
Yep, including Saturday at MLW. So yeah, we're talking about like Bandito, we're talking about Demonic Flamita, we're talking about Rey Horus, we're talking about any of LFI. I mean, well, except Roosh, who still has a knee injury.
Yeah.
Yes. Not Roosh, but everybody else, yes.
He can be on the sidelines. He can be the hype man.
Yeah. So,
And if you don't get excited, Roosh will manhandle you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, you know we will.
Yes. Well, that is this week in MLW. Stay tuned. Make sure you come back to us next week, because we are going to be able to bring you those results as much as we can on what happens at War Chamber. Up next, it's the segment you know. It's the segment you love. It's This Week in Lucha Libre History with Dusty.
That's right. It's time for This Week in Lucha Libre History. Be sure to check in at luchacentral.com every single day for this day in Lucha Libre by Pep Carrera. He's got information, he's got birthdays, he's got anniversaries, he's got matches of the day, he's got amazing videos, and even more. And everything he's got on there, the best part, it's all about Lucha Libre. And it's all free. And it's all at luchacentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre. This week we chose November the 6th, 1994, when the AAA/ICW/WCW crossover pay-per-view, When Worlds Collide, finally went down. When Worlds Collide, Spanish it was Cuando los Mundos Chocan. It took place at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, and it was both scripted and in-ring produced by AAA and their American partner at the time, the International Wrestling Council, the IWC. But the show was produced for television, and the technical production was done by WCW after then Executive Vice President Eric Bischoff helped AAA secure the show, secure the camera crews. He helped them navigate the issues with the unions. He did everything he can to kind of make this thing happen, which is interesting, especially given how things are now, to see WCW really working that hard. And it was because he had made the kind of a handshake deal with AAA that if they would send up some luchadors for Nitro, he would get them their own pay-per-view. And Bischoff was a man of his word. He made it happen. And this was the first time a non-US based wrestling promotion had ever shown on U.S. pay-per-view. So it was a huge deal at the time. Like, it was massive. For whatever reason, this is never, I guess due to the intercompany productions, it's never been on the WWE network. It's never been on Peacock. Brendan's mentioned this too. It all seems to have come from one guy who videotaped it back in 94, because they all have the same lines and the tape, like where he'd played it over and over again.
Yeah.
It was just special, and it was at a time when Lucha Libre wasn't seen as important or anything more than a real novelty by most American fans. But this was treated very seriously, very importantly, and it opened the door to the lucha that we all enjoy and watch today. As we covered last year, the main event of this show was a steel cage match between longtime rivals Conan and legends of Lucha Libre superstar Perro Aguayo. But now this year we're going to focus on the semi-main event. It was a tag team Luchas de Apuestas, mask versus hair, with the popular technical duo of Octagon and El Hijo del Santo taking on La Parrilla del Terror, which literally means the terror team in English, Mr. Art Barr and Eddie Guerrero. And while it wasn't the main event of the show, this was the semi-main event, and it was rated 5 stars by the Wrestling Observer back when that was really a huge deal.
Well, there was only 5 stars and only 4 matches at it. Yeah.
And it was a big deal at the time, and I wasn't, it was at the beginning of the internet. I wasn't super internet aware, but I saw that a lot at the time on the old, alt.sport.pro wrestling boards and stuff back in the day. Yeah. But yeah, I'm dating myself there, but yeah. And also the Observer Report that year named La Parrilla del Terror the tag team of the year, and Art Barr is the heel of the year. So they were really on a hot run. Mm-hmm. On July the 23rd of 1994, they had won the AAA tag team titles, but the storyline involved being that they had paid off the referee to call the match in their favor. And what kind of referee would take their money, you ask? Well, it was Tarantes.
Tarantes. I mean,
that's when he became a lifelong Rudo, was when he took the payout.
Yeah, if you've ever wondered why the AAA announcers, when they're talking on the English podcast, will always just rip into him saying he's a crook and a criminal, that match.
Yeah, because he let Eddie and Art Barr pay him off, and he's been a Rudo literally ever since. Like, if you've ever wondered why he was a Rudo ref, this is exactly where it started. And after they got swindled out of the tag team championships, that led Il Del Santo and Octagon to lay down what is truly considered the ultimate challenge in Lucha Libre. They wanted a Lucha de Apuestas match with their masks on the line against the hair of Art Barr and Eddie Guerrero. And this was a challenge that Eddie and Art eagerly accepted. The match was set for the When Worlds Collide pay-per-view in Los Angeles. And as this was the most important Mexican-style lucha match on the card, it's fitting that despite WCW's intervention on several matches against a 2 out of 3 falls, they were able to convince just based on the heat that these two guys, Eddie and Art Barr had, that they needed the 2 out of 3 falls to do it, any justice. So WCW agreed to it, and therefore, I mean, it was the only match of the night under traditional lucha rules. If you're, like a real lucha fan, 2 out of 3 falls matches happen all the time. Singles matches with 1 fall are exceedingly rare in lucha. So this was much more what you would see in Mexico. We even had a lucha stretcher shot with Octagon selling the pile driver from Art Barr like it murdered him. It was amazing.
Yes.
And after Octagon and Art Barr were eliminated, Il Del Santo was able to roll Eddie Guerrero up for the pinfall, get the victory. Following their big loss on their first American pay-per-view debut, both Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr visibly cried in the ring to sell how upset they were about losing their hair. It was incredible. They were the best heels, the best Rudos. I don't know that anybody's ever done it as well since then. If you watch this match, you'll probably agree with me. Brendan, what did you think of this match?
Oh man, well, this is historic. This was the beginning of, as you mentioned, the cruiserweights in WCW. We had 4 weeks, I believe it was. We had 4 or more weeks of the professor down in Mexico bringing us the culture of Lucha Libre before bringing us into this.
That's where I learned a lot about Lucha actually at the time.
This is where it began for me. I mean, my last name is Barr. I had followed Art Barr's career for the whole, and the Barr family was up here in the Pacific Northwest. So as soon as I found out that he was in that match, I was all about it. And I was watching all those Lucha spots. I was hooked at that point. And then, all the other Lucha matches are really compared against that one. And I guess that's not an unfair thing because it's a 5-star Lucha match. It has everything you need. It's got the drama, the emotion, you've got the good guys, the bad guys, you've got an unbeatable apuestas kind of factor to it because it's a tag team mask versus hair factor. I mean, the second fall in this is probably my favorite second fall in any lucha match. It's just perfect for forwarding all the action, bringing everything right back to focus of making the fans think that anything is possible. This is a technical masterpiece of a match, and it's the beginning of my lucha fandom. So I'm just going to gush whenever I talk about it. So Anyway.
It's really amazing. Yeah, like you say, historic and special. I mean, and it feels special. Even when you watch it now, like it feels like a very special, and they treated it with almost veneration at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Miranda, what did you think of this one?
So an interesting point you made about, this never being on the network. WWE has a playlist, that's on the network website, calling it the best pay-per-view you've never seen. And so there are some clips on WWE's website, but you're right as far as the fact that it is not widely distributed at all. So they have the footage. Why they aren't,
It's got to be legal reasons.
Yeah, there's definitely some more legal.
If they could, they would at this point, especially with Eddie Guerrero's legacy. So
exactly. I suspect it has something to do with the IWC connection.
I think it's part IWC and part Art Bar, because Art Bar's family is not really big on releasing footage.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
but especially the match that we're talking about, this tag match, it is an example of how this match in particular, or when you have an event, being the main event, but you're always having another match stealing the show and what people really remember a show by. And I feel like the tag match is what people remember the most. It was the most highly regarded and touted. And even the footage, seeing Eddie and Art walk to the ring, you've seen that in reels for decades now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know. Yeah, a lot of people don't know where did that footage come from, and it is this event. So I feel like the history of it, and then also knowing that long-term impact that it has with WCW and the Cruiserweight division. This was where a lot of that really started and took fruition. And I think also where WCW saw that there was a demand for Lucha Libre in the States. And because there wasn't any U.S. television that supported that, honestly, really until, WCW put it on the map. And so I think that just in the historical context, it's just very fascinating to see this event, but also, again, this match in particular, knowing the history that it had. Also, kind of the unfortunate history as well with Art passing away not too long after this. It's a snapshot in time, of when, worlds really did collide, where we saw really for the first time for a lot of people, luchadors whose names would go on forever in pro wrestling, who were talking about, 20 years afterward. And even at this point in 1994, Rey Mysterio and Conan and Eddie and, a lot of people have been wrestling for quite some time at this point. But the fact that this was really that U.S. introduction, or just, and maybe not full introduction, but I think this is the point in time when people really do feel like this was the introduction of Lucha Libre to a mainstream U.S. audience. To me, that is the big takeaway from this show.
It was even, as someone who did a lot of tape trading, Lucha was harder to get. I could get Japanese stuff. I couldn't get Lucha even after that for a good long while. And it's not that it was less available. It was all over Mexican TV. It's just there wasn't a demand for it until it was created.
Wasn't. It was late, maybe even early. It was either late 98 or early 99 and into 2000 before I remember seeing many Lucha tapes. I got more trading done in 2000 for Lucha tapes than I had ever traded before, like in any year, and it was all Lucha. And at the time, it was random stuff you could get. We laugh about a lot. I got Vampiro's on the same tape with this. I got Vampiro's debut in AAA around the same time. And
you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just a magic era, and once Art Barr died, he died 17 days after this show.
Yeah.
This was his final public appearance. And once he died, it really felt like I mean, it already felt like a new era of wrestling and lucha, but in all of lucha, you can kind of look at it before Art Barr died and after Art Barr died when you see the style, and it just, I don't know how to explain it, but his willingness to embrace anything that got over and worked and made his character bigger, and being so fearless became kind of a thing in lucha.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought just a swagger to lucha that had never been seen before. Los Gringos Locos was their stable. That was the first real stable in Lucha Libre. It just incredible stuff, and it all started here. Even though this is where Art Barr died, that's what led to Eddie going solo.
Yeah.
And so many ripples that happened just right around the show that it is truly what opened the door to everything we know and love now about Lucha Libre, about Lucha Libre in America, where we can see it, how we watch it, was all influenced by this show, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. It's on YouTube for free. You can see the whole thing. Original audio. The video's not bad. I mean, it's VHS quality, but it is not bad. The audio is not bad. Like, you should check it out while you can.
It's pretty good. I do want to also throw this back to, we talked a bit about this match and this period of time with Matt Farmer, and he had some insights in that interview we did with him as well on the influence of Los Gringos Loco and this match in that interview. So if you haven't listened to it, go check it out. If you did, maybe you glossed over it and you're hearing us get all excited about this pay-per-view, go back and listen to that part. And you can kind of match up with things we're talking about tonight. So,
well, we always tell you all of the great stuff that's on luchacentral.com. But you know what? We're going to remind you again. Brendan, can you let our listeners know what they can find on luchacentral.com?
Let's do it. If you're listening to this and you haven't visited luchacentral.com, it's time to do it. LuchaCentral.com is the online home for Lucha Libre, where you can get all of the top news in English and in Spanish. Find the best curated video content and original content not seen anywhere else. Find when Lucha Libre events would be happening in your area. Find photo galleries from top photographers covering Lucha Libre around the world. A place to have your voices heard, from weekly polls to annual awards, seen and read by top executives in all of the major Lucha Libre promotions across the globe. And on top of all of this, it's free. LuchaCentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre.
Brendan, you have some CMLL news to share.
Yeah, so our first wave of tapings of Day of the Dead events happened. It was a grand spectacle. Katrina welcomed us. People were dragged to hell. I mean, it's a thing. You just have to see it to understand that. Fantastic. So I'm going to give you some of the results. So we are starting about halfway through the card here. I fudged a little bit to allow for one of my favorites. Sometimes knowing people makes me want to give their results too. So we had a six woman match with the team of Avispa Dorada, La Vaquerita, Princess Sugahate against Dark Silueta, Reina Isis, and Stephanie Vacker. The technicals came out on top on this one. I was really afraid I was going to see Avispa dragged to hell, but not this year. Everybody had their unique masks and costumes. Dusty and I could gush about the costumes that they do at this show every year. And this match was no exception. So if if you get a chance, they hopefully will put this up on YouTube later. It was only on pay-per-view. It's all worth checking out. For nothing else, just look at the amazing production values. I say this every year. Then the next match, we had another 6-person tag match. It was Diamond, Magia Blanca Rugido against Cancerobo, Raziel, and Virus. Once again, the Technicos won this one. But when they won, they then challenged for the Mexican Trios Championship. They got on the microphone and challenged for that. So we might see Diamond, Magia Blanca, and Rugido in a Mexican Trios Championship in the near future. And then in the main event, you had the Rey del Inframundo Cibernetico, which consisted of Atlantis Jr., Mystico, Gran Guerrero, Volador Jr., Templario, Valiente, Camilio Diablo 1, Camilio Diablo 2, Angel de Oro, and Felino. Now, if you're not paying attention, that's pretty much everybody they've got left. That's at the top of their card, and that's not the champion. And so this is a big deal. They were pulling out all the stops. They put all of this in there.
This was a huge match, yeah.
Yeah. Atlantis Jr. came out on top on this one, which surprised me.
Yeah, me too. This is a big win for him.
Yeah. He's also a little more rudo this time around. So I don't know. They might be actually doing story with him. Or I could just be being too optimistic and reading details into it. But, Atlantis Jr. will be challenging. That should be, I believe that match is going to be Friday. So by the time this goes up, that match may have already happened. But we will, so we will have, 2 tapings this weekend, which will also be Day of the Dead themed. And, they are also going to be on iPay-per-view. So you kind of have to tune in to see it and otherwise hope that, either they put it up or Cubs fan or other specialized people like that put it up somewhere on the sly so that we can see it. And that was our CMLL results for this week. We will have more on the Day of the Dead matches next week because we do have the 2 more tapings. I'm super excited to watch more of it. I love these shows. I'm so glad we're getting 3 this year.
Thank you, Brendan. As we alluded to earlier in the show, we do have your NXT and WWE show recaps. For NXT, the only Lucha Central or Lucha Centric match we had was Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner versus Raul Mendoza and Joaquin Wilde. As far as what we saw on NXT, both were pretty much in the ring by the time we got back from commercial break. Von Wagner started the match really using his strength to beat down on Joaquin Wilde and Raul Mendoza. I do like to say there was such a great chemistry between Kyle O'Reilly and Raul Mendoza. I really liked the work that they did. Very fluid motions between the two. Towards the middle to end of the match, Kyle O'Reilly was distracted when Elektra Lopez came up and caused a distraction. And then there was a miscommunication between Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner that ended up costing them even more, where Von Wagner was pinned by Joaquin Wilde, who also had his feet up on the ropes. So a win for Legado de Fantasma, which again they needed, after the multiple losses that they've had. No Santos Escobar out this week with him as well. So that definitely, if we're talking about these releases and what happens with people, gets you a little scared.
More than a little.
Yes, more than a little, but, we still see that they may be really looking to push, Legado de Fantasma in some direction. What that means, we're not sure, because again, they did get the Rudo win here, but a win nonetheless. So make sure you stay tuned. The results for all of NXT are available on luchacentral.com, so make sure you stay tuned to that. And I'm going to hand it off to Dusty, who's going to give you the results from this week's WWE television.
Yeah, I actually wrote this before we heard about the releases, so you have to keep that in mind when we go through the results. But first up on Raw, we had Rey Mysterio versus Austin Theory. I was very torn on this match. It was apparently produced by Shane Helms and Sean Daivari. Great match. And on one hand, I love Austin Theory. and I love his character, and he does need some wins. But on the other hand, when it comes at the cost of Rey Mysterio losing to him and the whole thing advancing the pending breakup of Familia Mysterio, I'm not as excited. Like, it's truly like it's terrible. Not a fan of having the confliction in this one, but was a fan of the match. It ended with a DQ win for Austin after Dominic got involved and crossed Austin with a huge closed right hand. Like I said, we're running into the issues with the breakup, so hopefully it doesn't go too far. We also had Zelina and Carmella defeating Rhea Ripley and Nikki ASH. If you were one of those people that wanted them to give these women more time, well, you saw what we got this week with an 8.5 minute match. I thought Zelina performed as well as always and put in fantastic character work, but with the talent involved and the time they've given them to make this work on Raw, it should have produced a better match. We've seen better from all four competitors before, and counting the fact that it went so long, this was an 8 minute and 15 to 30 second match. I have 8 minutes and 30 seconds written and 8 minutes and 15 seconds, so yeah, but
that is a standard undercard match length.
Yeah.
Yes. But
we are cheering them for giving them.
Yeah.
Yes, we're cheering them for the minimum. Man,
sorry, Dusty, keep going.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my thing. Like, they gave him this much time and it was exciting. Zelina looked amazing, but I didn't think it lived up to the promise. I mean, I don't know. It another confliction. I think that WWE, maybe the match was cut in some way, changed in some way, but it shows a sign of faith in Zelina and Carmella. Johnny Ace is the manager of talent relations now, or whatever his title is, and, Carmella and Zelina are just kind of his type, so maybe she'll get a good push as we go. The women's tag titles are so devalued, it's hard to predict where they go, but they may hotshot them onto these two real quick. We'll see what they do for attention. Then on 205 Live, we had Saray versus Katrina Cortez. And this is the one I mentioned where I wrote it before and you would see, because the crowd loved Katrina Cortez. Her and Saray are both solid and talented upcoming stars in women's wrestling. I thought that Katrina would be a upcoming star in the women's division, not so much. I hope we get to see a lot more from her. I would like to have seen more of the pairing between Saray and Katrina in the future. It felt like the beginning of a long rivalry in a way. Despite a small resurgence, some amazing offense in the middle of the match by Katrina, Saray was able to snatch the victory with a seated drop kick against Katrina, who was on the ropes. The match itself lasted around 6 minutes, and it was incredibly exciting. The crowd was super into Katrina. Hopefully she lands somewhere and becomes a big deal. We need to see a lot more of her in the future. Next week, more Lucha Libre stuff in WWE. I'm sure we'll we'll cover it. Sorry. Trying to read the group message as we're moving on. But now I want to hand this off to Miranda. She's got some news in Impact Wrestling for us.
Yes, an interesting development on this week's Impact Wrestling on Access TV. We had a number one contenders match for the X Division Championship that featured Steve Macklin versus Laredo Kid versus Black Taurus versus Rohit Raju. I wasn't able to watch the match, well, because we were recording at the time, but the big news to come out of that is Laredo Kid won. You do want to see the Laredo Kid did a beautiful moonsault, off the, post, onto the rest of the group that is on Impact social media. So if you want to check out that clip, check out Impact Wrestling, but he did win and is now the new number one contender for the X Division Championship. And Impact Wrestling just posted right now, as of 9 minutes from when we were talking, that Laredo Kid will face Trey Miguel for the X Division Championship at Turning Point on November 20th at Sam's Town in Las Vegas. So that's definitely a match that's going to be a highlight of Turning Point. It's going to be exclusive to the Impact Plus app, but Laredo Kid getting his shot at the X Division Championship. Also announced for Turning Point, Mercedes Martinez will be facing Mickie James Mercedes Martinez is cashing in on the tournament win that she had at the Knockouts Knockdown back last month. And so that too is going to be a highly anticipated match. But really the big news coming out of Impact this week is Laredo Kid becoming the new number one contender for the X Division Championship, and he will be facing Trey Miguel at Turning Point. Also, just a heads up, this is just a personal plug, Las Vegas local talent and PCW ultraweight champion Jay Vidal made an appearance on Impact Wrestling facing Eric Young. Quick match where Eric Young did a pretty nasty tombstone onto Jay Vidal. Got a good bounce in there from Jay, but still Eric Young is a monster in it of himself. Also coming back into the ring after injury, so it had to happen, but just a big personal congratulations to Jay Vidal on making his Impact debut on this week's episode. Great talent, lucha experience as well, and your current PCW ultraweight champion. So
as of the last event, so
yes.
yeah, that was a fantastic match. Yeah, he's worth checking out any chance you get. So even this brief appearance on Impact is probably well worth it.
Yes. Make sure that you stay tuned. And you know what? I'm making an executive decision because we got through some of that stuff real quick. Our final news story of the episode of this week's show is Ring of Honor. I know we got a brief it's very strange how we started off last week's episode with Ring of Honor. We're ending this week's episode with Ring of Honor.
Yeah, well, not a lot of news has happened. They didn't have a TV show at all this week, as I mentioned at the end of last week's show. They probably won't have another one this week for the same reason. I haven't seen an official announcement yet. But they did announce that they're going to go ahead. They're still going to have the Honor Club special on the Ring of Honor app. That'll be on the 14th of 11/14. It will, and they've got a couple lucha matches for us here. So we're going to have Demonic Flamita versus Bandito in a no DQ match. And Dragon Lee and Kenny King are going to face off with the OGK consisting of Matt Taven and Mike Bennett for the World Tag Team Championship. So they're going to end the programming on a bang. So we're getting some good stuff.
Yes. And also Ring of Honor did put on their social media, or on their YouTube page, they do have a great vignette, of Women of Honor highlighting who they think will be Roxy's next challenger, which highlights a lot of the women who were in the Ring of Honor, women's tournament, earlier this year. So that does include, highlights of Willow Nightingale, Miranda Alizé, and much, much more. So if you want, to relive some of those elements of the, women's championship tournament, you can go to Ring of Honor. They even have kind of a brief rundown of that match as well on Ring of Honor's YouTube page.
On a personal note, they were building story with Miranda Alizé and Roxy and building a feud. So if we don't see a resolution of that before the company ends, either on one of these two pay-per-views or in a YouTube match somewhere, I'm going to be upset.
Yes. Well, we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot of storylines that may be left hanging a little bit, unfortunately.
That's the one. That's the one. I'm drawing my line at that one.
That is the one. Well, listeners, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. You can always find this podcast on luchacentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre. Don't forget to follow Lucha Central on social media at luchacentralcom on Facebook and Instagram, and at Lucha Central. I'm sorry. Let me go back to that. At Lucha Central on Facebook and Instagram, at luchacentralcom on Twitter. So make sure You know that. It's different on Twitter. Lucha Central, on Twitter. And of course, you got the YouTube page that has hours upon hours of content that you can find just exclusively through Lucha Central. And don't forget, if you are listening to this show through your favorite podcast streaming platform like Spotify, Podbay, iTunes, Speaker, subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe so that way you get notifications every time a new episode of the Lucha Central Weekly podcast drops. Leave us a 5-star rating and feel free to share a review with us. Let us know your thoughts on the show, on the content that we cover, on the news stories we discuss, because we'd love to get your feedback. Another way that you can give us your feedback is following us on social media. Dusty, where can our listeners find you?
I think you're on mute, Dusty.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my cats, they get up by the microphone. I'm always afraid you'll hear cat brushing against it. But I am on Instagram at Dusty Murphy and Facebook.com/Dusty Murphy.
Can't be any worse than my dog's barking in the background. I think you're fine.
I got podcasts sometimes, and I can hear their little bell ringing as they're running around trying to get my attention.
Yes.
I've always got all this traffic behind me, so I have no room to talk. I'm getting a studio at some point, but I need more money. So, start buying stuff from our sponsors.
Man, yeah. More money, more problems. As they say. I would know because I don't have very much, but if I did, I could only imagine. Brendan, where can our listeners find you?
I am 321 T-shirt guy. It's the numbers 321 and then T-shirt guy is all spelled out. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm all over the Twitters.
And me, Miranda Morales, you can find me at the #Miranda, spelled out. Make sure you follow us on social media. And once again, if you are an independent wrestler, promoter, fan that has ties to Lucha Libre, please make sure you reach out to us on social media because you may be featured on a future edition of the Indie Roundup. We support independent wrestling. We love going to independent wrestling shows and watching videos. So please make sure that you reach out to us. Make sure you stay tuned to next week's episode. As I tease, we are going to be talking with someone who is very well ingrained in the independent wrestling scene, takes clips really everywhere he goes, and some that you've seen before, some that we've mentioned on the show before. So enough hints. You're just going to have to wait till next week to find out who we interview. But again, thank you all so much for listening. If this was your first time, if this was your 100th time, that can't be because we've only done 79 episodes.
You're coming back from the future.
Yeah.
Tell us what it's like.
Tell us who wins Triple Mania.
Yeah, tell us who wins Triple Mania, and please warn us of more releases.
Yeah, and lottery numbers.
Such a good fact. That's why Dusty's the brains of a lot of this operation. Talk about more money, more problems. Trying to get that future money in rolling.
Lucha millionaires.
So thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned. We got you covered each and every week on the Lucha Central Weekly podcast on luchacentral.com, on your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as our partners at thechairshot.com. For Dusty Murphy and Brendan Barr, I'm Miranda Morales. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will be with you next week. En esta esquina, el santo y el tabernáculo.